Have you ever sat feeling smothered by trauma and pain all around you, wondering if this was all there was to life? Whether you're considering divorce or you're right in the middle of a messy one, and aren't they all messy? Besides, you can insert any painful event here. It's hard to think about anything but the loss, the pain, the trials, and the trauma around you. Yet where you focus makes all the difference. And today we're going to talk about a new way to focus to move from trauma and pain to victoriously thriving. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Starting Over Stronger show, where you'll find help and hope for your divorce survival and recovery. Divorce well, live well.
Welcome back to the Starting Over Stronger Divorce Survival and Recovery show. Jennifer Harris is joining me today. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great. And I want to tell the audience a little bit about you. Jennifer is a mother of two boys. She lives in Pennsylvania. She's an international speaker, coach, and author of the Divorce Bucket List. I understand that she's passionate about sharing her story of trauma, a painful divorce, and how she developed what she calls the divorce bucket list to help her move forward. And today, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, is how we can turn our own traumatic experiences, toxic marriages, families, divorce, whatever, into a reinvention and a true chance to step into a better future and thrive. So thank you for being here to talk about this.
No problem at all. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to just jump right into your very exciting new book that you called the Divorce Bucket List. What is the Divorce Bucket List and how does it help?
So the divorce bucket list is something that I accidentally basically stumbled upon after going through a really, really tough divorce after a toxic marriage. I know anyone that's been through divorce can probably relate to both of those things in one way or another. I had gotten to a point where I was definitely involved in self-sabotaging behavior because of the divorce and was in a really dark place, just negative behavior. And I had gotten basically to what I would call my rock bottom, to a point where it was like things either had to change or I was going to continue to forever live in an unhappy, negative space, or maybe not even live at all. And so it became time for change. And I was having a glass of wine with a friend on their porch I think it was in the summer one night. And we were just talking about how I had just, had a couple of experiences that were a little scary for me and how I needed to change and how was I going to do that and how I felt really lost and afraid. And we started talking about how, well, I don't really do anything unless it's on a list. Like if I need to brush my teeth in the morning, it's got to be on a list, but not that drastic because I do brush my teeth every day, but almost that bad. And so they were like, well, what if we just go through and create a list of some things that you can do instead of being on Tinder and instead of drinking, what if we create a list of things that you could just move your focus to? And so I started, this list and we just started putting things on there that were things that maybe my ex-husband used to do around the house that I could start doing, things that needed to get done that I had been neglecting, things for personal development, or maybe even things as far as something I had always wanted to do, but never did, and things I had lost touch with. And I started going through it and ended up rediscovering myself, falling back in love with life again and with myself and fully rebuilding and thriving after divorce. So after speaking on stage at the end of that as part of my actual one of the things on the bucket list, I ended up doing a solo trip and speaking on stage at the end to thousands in London. And after talking to some people after that, I realized I needed to write the book so that more people could hear the story and learn the things that I learned without taking as much time to learn it.
Very good. So how would you say that process helped you with your divorce?
I would say it definitely helped me get out of the negative space that many can face during the divorce. And, I wish I had started it sooner. so that I didn't spiral as far as I did. But it also helped me to find myself again, because I feel like a lot of us, when we're in a marriage, it could be a 2-year marriage or 20-year marriage, that marriage ends up defining you. And so, to go through a divorce, you lose yourself in a way. And so I found that as I was going through this divorce bucket list, not only was I able to change focus to, positivity, but I was able to also find myself again and just rebuild, go from, this life that I thought was forever to completely unknowns of what was going to happen to rediscovery.
Okay. Very good. Well, I'm sure that many people will be benefiting from the fact that you decided to write this book. What would you say was the main impetus for, I've lived this thing, now I need to put it into a book so other people can?
So I actually started sharing my journey on social media. And as I was sharing it and writing the book, I had a lot of people come to me. And even before I started writing the book, some of the things that had happened before I decided to write it, because I actually completed, I'd say 95% of the bucket list before I started writing the book. And so as I was doing that on social media, people were coming to me and saying, oh my gosh, this is helping me through my divorce, or I have a friend that needs to hear this. Can I send this snippet of your story to them? And the more people came to me and told me how much it was helping them, the more I realized that I needed to share it to help other people. I realized that going through the trauma I went through didn't have to be in vain. I didn't have to suffer for no reason. I could use what I went through to show other people, A, that they could get through it, and B, how to do it. Because, I spent all these years learning how, why not make it a little easier for them? So I decided to sit down and put it into words.
Yeah. Now, did you do this bucket list during your divorce or after?
So I created it, I would say about 3 months after my ex-husband filed.
Okay.
So that's when I created it. And I immediately started taking small actions, because there were small things on there and then there were big things. And so I knew I wasn't going to do everything immediately, but I did start taking immediate action with smaller things. And the whole thing took probably about 2 years to make. So, or to complete, I mean, and the divorce took about 2 years. So I was doing it as the divorce was progressing, but also after it finished.
Okay. And I'm assuming that, whether somebody discovers this concept during or after their divorce, I'm sure they can put it to good use regardless. So I was just curious what your experience was.
Absolutely. And I've actually found through talking to other people that it's even beneficial for someone who's contemplating a divorce, or even maybe in a marriage or a relationship that might be salvageable, but they're not sure, because the process of going through this divorce bucket list helps them kind of focus on improving as a person. And you get lost in relationships. So even if you can rediscover yourself and salvage a relationship, or give yourself confidence to get out of a toxic one, it still helps in that way too. So all places throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I have a list here of 5, what I'll just call highlights maybe of your experience. And I think they play into the book, but you can share as much of your story as you wish as we go. I'll just kind of offer the idea, and then you tell us a little bit more about how that fits into either the story of your divorce or the book. And so the first one is getting organized to get your desired results during divorce. Was some of the tasks on your bucket list about that?
Yeah. So it's very easy to let your emotions take hold of you when you start going through a divorce. And a lot of the times we freeze in place. And so we find ourselves just kind of going through motions without any purpose. And I found myself there too. So there were times where I would meet with a lawyer, and it would be a really inefficient meeting, which, means more money, especially when you're talking about counsel. And so I realized after a while that I had to start getting organized, and that the more organized I was, the more money I would save in the end. Not only the more money would I save with, lawyer calls and lawyer fees, but also I would be able to really organize and figure out what I even wanted out of the divorce, and, work to actually achieve that, because I do know there are many stories out there where people say, well, I went through the divorce and I just gave them whatever they wanted because I just wanted out. And that doesn't have to be the case. You can get out in a timely manner. You can be happy again, and you can still get what you deserve out of the divorce process. But I think the number one step to that is getting organized. And so document. And in the book, I go through a comprehensive list of, some of the things that you want to kind of get together and document, for the actual process, so that you can not only know what you want, but fight for what you want and have efficient meetings with counsel.
Yeah, exactly. My listeners and clients will recognize this as the divorce notebook or the divorce file. We talk about it a lot. And
I love that.
And it is just that. I mean, I still have mine sitting here in a cabinet off to the side here, and it's a pretty little accordion file with an elastic band to close it. But this was back pre-COVID, so a lot of my stuff was paper. And so I was keeping everything organized in there. And I always encourage my clients to do that as well, because even if it's an electronic file, where everything is. And it just really helps so much with organizing your emotions and your decisions, which is really what it all comes down to. And so being organized isn't about making things look pretty so much as it is just being able to function better. So that's a great start to this. So then the second part is rediscovering and empowering yourself through and after your divorce. Certainly just the act, I think, of writing a lot of stuff down that you intend to do and you check off as you go would accomplish that. But what specifically would you say your experience or your bucket list do as far as rediscovering and empowering?
So it's really important, I think, to reconnect with yourself. And so what I did going into it is I actually created kind of a journal for myself. And I got really heavy into journaling and visualization. And I know not everyone has time or even likes to write. So if that's not you, that's okay. You can just think things through in your head. But it helps to ask yourself certain questions like, what is something I've always wanted to do but never did? And then there's all kinds of questions that you can, dive into. And again, I give a list of those in the book in further detail. But, doing these questions and going through these exercises really helps you identify how to rediscover yourself. And, to get into the empowerment part, there's some things that you can do to really empower yourself, not just to know that you are worthy and deserve the things that you want out of life, but to actually start taking small action towards them. And so reconnecting is one of those, rediscovering. So, knowing that, when you were in a partnership, right, sometimes you combine hobbies and interests and, you are going through something where you might feel like you can't, maybe you did yoga together. It's just an example. And maybe you feel like you can't do yoga anymore because you had a favorite yoga studio and you went to that together and now it doesn't feel right going by yourself. Just going by yourself once or finding a new yoga studio will help you, that rediscovery or, reconnecting to something that you would never, that you lost touch with. Maybe you like to run before and you stopped running because you got busy, but now you have shared custody. So you have an extra hour a week, something like that. So, rediscovering and reconnecting really helps you empower yourself to, find yourself again and also finding something new. So, sometimes it's about distraction and getting out of the feels. And so just finding a new hobby or a group to join, whether it's a support system, like a Facebook group or going on to Meetup and finding, again, when you think about those rediscovery, reconnection tasks, like the habits there or the hobbies there, just finding a group around that you could join and find new people to connect with over it instead of just that marriage connection that you had with it. So those are some things that can help.
Yeah, I would say that probably lines up heavily with just activities and interests and the ways that our roles change as we go through a divorce. And certainly, all the way down to one of the examples I use quite often is being asked shortly after my divorce what my favorite food was. And my immediate thought would have actually been the answer to what his favorite food was, which tended to be what we always went and ate. And so I thought more about it and I'm like, I guess I need to think about what my favorite food is, because you just kind of lose yourself in the whole, duality, I guess, of being part of a partnership. And so certainly writing things down and trying new things and, seeing yourself be able to check things off of a list and to find things that bring you joy that you didn't even realize. That's definitely a very empowering experience. And it feels good to discover who you are through this process. So that's great. Are you struggling to decide whether divorce is the right decision for you, or just tired of feeling like you're broken and everything is all your fault? The decision of how and whether to leave a toxic relationship can take years without good support from people who understand. The Starting Over Stronger Toxic Relationship Recovery Support Group is designed with you in mind. Led by me, certified divorce and life transition coach Annie Allen, and with a small group of women in your shoes, you're going to find understanding here. We're going to talk about the patterns of these relationships and what you can do about them. There are currently 2 weekly groups running, one on Monday evenings at 6 p.m. Central and the other on your Wednesday lunch hour at noon Central. So whether you need an evening or a daytime group to meet your needs for privacy during this call, please consider joining us. If you're interested in learning more, just send an email with your interest from your secure email address that only you have access to Annie@startingoverstronger.com. And if you're in a controlling or abusive relationship, wondering how you could ever be a part of a support group like this without putting yourself at risk or exposing your desire to leave, please indicate that in your email and we can discuss solutions. You can make this work. And I know you feel alone, but you're not. Reach out and find the help you need. And then the next thing I have is divorce budgeting. So a lot of us, kind of cringe when we think about the money factor of everything, especially if we weren't highly involved in the production of money or the managing of it in our former relationship. So how did this play into your divorce bucket list?
That's a great question. So I won't get too in depth with it because that could be a whole 7-hour conversation, I feel like, but just to keep it basic, because finances are very complex, is, whether you're debating a divorce and you just want to assess the situation, can I afford, living on my own, or maybe it's already started and you need to figure out how can I live on my own? Because a lot of the times we go from a 2-income or more income household down to a 1 or almost 0 income household, depending on the situation. And so it's important, and this kind of goes back to the organization too. It's important to identify, as scary as it is, what your situation looks like so that you can assess and make changes as necessary. Because just because you're going from a situation where you relied on another income does not mean that necessarily that you have to make that many lifestyle changes, because there are so many ways to get creative. But the first thing you have to do is identify the budget, identify the problems, and assess the changes that you need to do. And one way to do that is to, number one, sit down and write out all of the income, maybe. So for example, if I was, just to give, because there's so many different situations that this could apply to, but if I was to be in the situation where, my husband says, I want a divorce, or I say, I want a divorce, and I know I'm getting a divorce and I need to figure out, okay, how is this going to work? I would sit down and I would take his income out of it, right? I would just completely take that out of it. And I would sit down, and I love Excel. So I use Excel. You could use a Google spreadsheets, a napkin if you want, whatever, but write it down. So you need to write down all of your income that you would have without them. And that can be, factor in an estimate if there's alimony or child support that will come into play. You can work with counsel to figure that out, or the internet is very helpful. But come up with an estimate for that, your salary, any bonuses, any side hustles that you have, anything like that. All income goes onto the paper. Total that up, total income. Then you're going to go and you're going to look at your expenses. And my biggest tip here is to get comprehensive. And one way to do that is to use some type of a template. Again, There is a template for free in my book, but there's tons on Google as well. So you don't even need the book for that. It's just, you could go into Google and just look for full budget template, and they're for free everywhere. And so you can download that and just make sure you don't miss a category is the point here, because it's very easy if you're just going off the top of your head, you're going to forget something. So you're going to add all those up. And what I normally do is I look at it on a monthly basis. So monthly income, monthly expenses, add it up. Then what you're going to do is you're going to subtract your expenses from your income. And if the number you get is positive, then you're probably in a pretty good space, right? Because your income's greater than your expenses, even with your ex-spouses. I know I keep saying husband, but this could be flipped, right? So your ex-spouse's, income out of the picture, you look good. But maybe you want to look even better, right? So we'll keep that to the table. But maybe you do this, you subtract your expenses from your income and you get a negative number. And that means you're in a deficit. That means that you cannot afford your current standard of living. So you have one of two choices. You can either change your expenses or change your income. And that's where you go in and you look at it and you say, okay, I could get a side hustle. I could drive DoorDash, get creative, get on Google. What can I do from home? Everyone's situation is different, but don't be small-minded. The world we live in there are so many opportunities and it's great. So you can increase your income, or you can also go in and the budget resource that I have in the book, actually, it is in Google spreadsheets, but it lets you go through your expenses, and you can do this without the spreadsheet too. I'll just explain it. Is you can go through and say, okay, is this a must keep expense, or can I delete it, or can I maybe reduce it? And you can start analyzing on a separate piece of paper or spreadsheet or whatever, what does this new budget potentially look like if I get rid of this expense? Maybe I don't need Netflix for a little bit, or, whatever you can decrease or get rid of. And that might, help fix your deficit. And so you go through and you figure that out, and you just assess it, and you figure out, what do I need to do? So maybe for like the divorce bucket list, if I look at my budget and I say, all right, I need some more income because I'm not willing to change my standard of living. Then I say, all right, get a side hustle. And that goes on the divorce bucket list. And then I just start taking the small steps to make that happen.
Okay. Very good. Well, there's a lot there, but I think the most important takeaway from that is just simply that we got to start looking at our money. And I've heard someone say many times, the more you pay attention to the money, the more it likes being paid attention to, and things just start happening. And I think a lot of that has to do with that we kind of tend to get in our own way when we refuse to look at something and have kind of a frozen mindset about it versus, letting it just flow and being just like, this is the reality. How am I going to make this work, and stop letting it intimidate you? And so along those lines, the next thing on the list is common divorce mistakes and how to avoid them. And so, of course, I'll start with that, that you've got to look at things and be willing to see them from different perspectives, different angles. A lot of the common divorce mistakes from my vantage point are made purely by emotion, and that's why they're mistakes. So what are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more with both of the things you just said, because, saying not looking at things, one of the biggest mistakes that I see and that I even made was not having a plan. So if you think about it, you get in a car and you don't know where you're going to go, then you're just going to drive in circles. So if you don't know what the picture looks like, you can't do anything about it. And if you don't know what you want, then you can't take the actions to get there. So it's, again, very easy, like you and I have both said already, to get super frozen because we're afraid, we're dealing with trauma. Divorce is trauma. So we're dealing with trauma. We're afraid, we're hurt. And so it's easy to freeze in place, but you have to look, as painful as it is, you have to look at the picture and you have to make a plan. And not just a plan for, budgeting and finances, but a plan for, how am I going to rebuild? I want to give everyone permission to cope and deal with emotions, but pick yourself up and get a plan. And with what you said with emotions, that's also another very common mistake I see, is you let them get in the way. And I don't think it's something that, we say it's a mistake, but I don't think it's an avoidable one. I've racked my brain for years now. And I think it's something that it's more like, be aware of it. That way, when it starts happening to you, because you're going to feel emotions and want to act out of fear, anger, sadness, or guilt even. And your emotions are going to overcome your logic, but that's going to hurt you in the end with money, costs of the divorce, causing further emotional damage, potentially damage to relationships around you. So just be aware that your emotions are going to happen and that you need to get control of them as soon as they do. So yes, go cry in your bed for an hour in the bathtub or whatever, but then say, okay, I've got to get this together because I have a plan. And so they kind of work together. If you can get those under control, I think then all of the other mistakes that are made along the way are not as detrimental and can be fixed.
Yeah. And I think you just hit on something very important. We're not saying that you shouldn't have emotions and that you shouldn't feel them intensely. You definitely should. I love saying, feel all the feelings you need to feel until you feel better. and truly cry. You know, some people are just so afraid of tears. I'm like, tears are healing. Cry all you want to, cry all you need to, you know, do all the things you need to do to feel everything you're feeling. It's just that you shouldn't make decisions based on that. And so sometimes people need a little bit of help understanding the difference between the two. You know, how can I have feelings but not make the decisions with them? So I'm sure that the bucket list addresses that as well. And the last thing that I have as a highlight is overcoming the trauma of divorce with intention. And I think that probably summarizes everything about the bucket list. Is it's just choosing to be intentional about things and to stop seeing yourself as a victim. And that's a very, very powerful mind shift.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you just said about the victim mindset because, you know, life happens. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen. All kinds of things. And no matter what is happening, you can look at it in one of two ways. You can say, this is happening to me. This sucks. This did this to me and woe is me. And that's the easy way. That's easy. We all default to that. And if you do that, don't feel shameful because we do. It's just the easy response. But you have a choice to go down the other way, which is, all right, this happened, or it's happening around me, but it's out of my control. But I do have control of certain things, and I can control the way I react and what I do going forward. And so I always like to compare it to if you go into a coffee shop and someone spills coffee on you, you know, you can curse them up and down. How dare they? They weren't watching where they were going. And in reality, because reality is just your perception of what happened, everyone's reality is different. In reality, it's very possible that they were looking where they were going and you stepped too far to the right because you were looking at the cost of your coffee. I don't know. But it's possible that you had some fault in that. And you could say, okay, well, this sucks. I'm sure they feel bad. I feel bad. My shirt's wet, but I can dry it. And I can, you know what? It's 9 a.m. It doesn't have to ruin my day. I can still have a great day. Matter of fact, I'm going to take a bath tonight and read my favorite book. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'll be warm then instead of, freezing from a wet shirt all day. I don't know. Just an example, but you can change the way that you view things. And all it is it's a muscle, just like going to the gym. If you want to have a bicep, you can't walk into the gym and look at the counter and then turn around and leave. You have to go in repeatedly and do the exercise. Same with the way that we can change our perception and that mindset of being intentional with rebuilding is, not, oh, I'm going through a divorce, life sucks, but you have to do these practices to train your brain to say, okay, going through a divorce can't control that. But what I can control is what happens next in my life. Because when it comes down to it, a divorce is an opportunity. It's a completely blank slate. You get to reinvent yourself. It's like you went to a high school, but like you weren't popular there at all and everyone was picking on you. And now you get to go to a new high school and pick who you are. Right. So it's really a blessing. It is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, this is Annie. I wanted to stop for just a moment and ask you what you're doing, besides listening to this podcast, to take care of yourself during your divorce. I mean, after all, if you don't, who will? There are several ways you can join Starting Over Stronger as you heal through divorce. First of all, very exciting news. We just launched the brand new StartingOverStronger.com website. Come check it out and become a member so you can stay up to date on all the latest opportunities for support. If you haven't yet, you're also welcome to join our private Starting Over Stronger After Divorce group on Facebook. Denise recently joined there and shared that her divorce is a minute by minute struggle at times. And Gretchen also joined us recently as she faces a difficult separation situation and has all kinds of questions about what to do to protect herself. And of course, the more of you that join this group, the more answers you all can get from each other. And of course, I chip in there too. Now, the best spot for answers is in private or group coaching, where we can talk specifically about the exact issues that you're facing in a private format. So you'll also find out more about those on the new website. I watch for you to join both the new website platform and the Facebook group. Remember, the website is just startingoverstronger.com. But the private Facebook group is Starting Over Stronger After Divorce. And you will have to answer some questions there. And we make very sure that anybody that joins is someone that belongs. So I hope to see you all there soon. I would love to meet more of my listeners and get to know each of you and the situations that you're facing. So I hope to see you there soon. Well, I have just a few more questions for you, and I'll start with, what were some of the major challenges that you faced during your divorce, and how did you overcome them?
So the biggest one for me was dealing with depression and anxiety. So going into the divorce, because of the toxic situation that my marriage was, I ended up developing a panic and anxiety disorder to the point where I couldn't even drive. I lost my job. I wasn't functioning as an adult. And so I started to, knowing that the divorce was coming, I started to really do the work to get that under control, knowing I had no choice. If I wanted to be a single mom and a single adult functioning in society, I had to get it under control. So I started to do that, and I was making great progress. But then once the divorce started, it was like whack-a-mole. Like I had started to rise and someone just went, boop, nope, not today. And so, just having to struggle through the feels, like you said, all the feels, and overcoming that again, like overcoming something I already battled again was really hard, especially because what I found is as I went through my divorce, there were times where I was like, all right, I did it. I'm at the top of the mountain. We got through the asset battle, and then the final paperwork would come and I'd go slide right back down that mountain, like a mudslide. And I would be like, I thought this was over, but the feelings, they kept coming in waves. And so that was a really big challenge for me was, when is this over? And I think, in the end, it's not ever really over. You're always going to have those emotions, but it's all about, again, letting yourself have some grace when you feel them and acknowledge them, and then do those exercises that you have to do to keep your mind in a positive place.
Yeah. And so what I heard you say there is just grace for yourself for where you are as you feel these challenges, and then just setting intentions about how to shift your mind so that you can think differently about them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because once you conquer all that, I think, when it comes to challenges, once you conquer all of that, or at least get it under control, once you have control of it, then the rest of the challenges you face aren't as hard. I think, like, you're ready, you're confident and empowered to take them on.
Yeah. And so one of the questions that I have here for you, I think we've kind of already answered, is how to use a traumatic experience, whether it's divorce or any other significant loss someone's facing, as an opportunity to grow. And so I guess just along those lines, something that I like to say is, don't just go through your divorce, grow through your divorce. You didn't have to just get through it. You can actually use it as, the fertilizer on the garden to actually grow something beautiful. Why should someone want to do that?
Well, if life is short, and there's not a single person in this world that hasn't been through a traumatic experience of some sort. And if you're listening and you haven't, I'd love to meet you. But trauma happens and things happen, and life is really short. And we are cognitive beings. We do have the ability to change the way we think and control, our not our emotions, but our mindset around things. And so, if you don't take control over that and grow, and just, I love your saying too. So I say something similar. I say, don't just survive, thrive, don't just get through it, use it. I think, it's important to be an opportunist when it comes to going through trauma or negative experiences because they're happening for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They're happening to you because you can get through them. But then, if you get through them, do you really want to spend the rest of your life sulking over it? Life is so short. It is not worth letting something define you for that long. But, going through these things, it's forcing you out of your comfort zone because a lot of the times we don't do things we want to do because we're comfortable. And this is an opportunity where you're already uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
like divorce as an example. It's not comfortable. You may or may not have wanted it, but I'm sure when you got married, you didn't say, oh, can't wait to get divorced. You were comfortable to some degree in that level of marriage. And so you weren't doing things to challenge yourself. But now you're already uncomfortable. Why not get a little bit more uncomfortable and make the changes that you've always thought about in the back of your mind?
Yeah, that's true. Great point. Well, some of the big issues that most people deal with as they go through divorce, or certainly the major challenges involve the kids and the money. So, what would you say are your top tips for successfully co-parenting?
So, communication is huge, and I know for us, I'm not even going to lie. I was so mad at my ex-husband when our divorce started because from the second he moved out, he would not communicate with me via anything but email. And at first I was like, this is so childish. Like, can't you just pick up a phone and have because, email is not always convenient,
Right.
And so I was getting annoyed at the inefficiency of it, really. And looking back at it, it was the best thing. Like, he was smart on that one. That was the best thing that we could have done because now we communicate, in person and on the phone and text. It's all fine. But at the beginning, the emotions are so high, especially with kids involved, that it's important to use something almost professional, like email's more professional. It's not as easy to spout off emotions. So it helped us, start to create healthy communication boundaries because you guys, in the marriage have already been communicating on a certain level. If you're getting a divorce, it was probably not a healthy level. I think that's safe to assume. But now you have the ability to redefine boundaries for now going forward. And so the communication boundaries are really, really important. I think also, once we established that, we were able to, really get organized and have a good standard, but also making that commitment to make the kids priority number one. So it's not always easy because there were definitely times where my kids were around and my mom would call and I would just want to vent so bad to her about what was going on with the divorce, but I had to wait. And it took a lot. And I'm sure I slipped up from time to time. It took a lot of self-discipline, but because we made that physical commitment or that verbal commitment, the kids are number one. We were able to kind of at least be aware of what we were doing and how it was impacting them. And then I would say the last thing, the third and last thing, because there's so much advice out there and it's all great, is to, communicate with your kids. So, I always made it a point, along the way, at some point, I didn't set a time, but I would say probably once a week in the beginning, I would take each kid aside and it wasn't formal. It was just, maybe at bedtime, I was reading one a story. I would just say, how are you? How are you feeling about everything? What can I do to make this better for you or easier for you? And then just listen. And I think just doing that helped them so much through it that they didn't feel put in the middle as much. And, they felt safer with the whole situation.
Yeah. And along those same lines, another major obstacle being money. Certainly, we've already kind of talked about what budgeting could look like and how you could kind of get some mastery over that as you go through divorce. But what would you say in your own experience was the most helpful for you just to have that feeling of mastery over the whole money situation? And that's not just how am I going to handle money once the divorce is final, but how am I surviving financially during the divorce? How am I going to advocate well for myself if I need maintenance or alimony or child support? How do I execute that well?
I would say education was the biggest thing there. So, going into the divorce, I had no clue about alimony or child support. And to be honest, for the majority of our marriage, I was the major breadwinner. There were times where he wasn't employed and I was the only one bringing in the income. And then things switched about 6 months before we got before he said he wanted a divorce, almost a year before we filed. We had agreed, because he had found a new job, that I was going to now leave my corporate America job, and because of my health at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was going to try to focus on a side business while being the primary caregiver for the children, while he focused on, because he had gotten a promotion, he wanted to focus on his career. So we kind of switched roles. And, that was a difficult adjustment for everyone. But then, making that change, and then a couple months later, him saying, I want a divorce, felt like a slap in the face. Like, how am I going to pay my bills now? Because you told me to do this, and I wanted it too, it was necessary, but it felt like a slap in the face. So for me, it was important to get educated on what alimony and child support looked like, because I didn't know, there's all kinds of things like, income potential and all of that. And, as I learned all of that, it got overwhelming and scary. But the more and more I learned, it also helped me know that I was going to be okay. And that, I also weighed out options. So I think it's important to not just educate yourself, but get some options together, and don't be intimidated by any of the options out there, whether it's looking at adding more income temporarily, like maybe getting a second job or a side job, or there's so many things out there, like I said before, that you can just take advantage of. So having options and getting educated, and just when it comes to actually fighting for what you want, just make sure that you are vocal. Like if you're using counsel, you're vocal about what you want. And if you're not using counsel and you're doing a mediator or doing it on your own, be vocal about what you want. And if you can't come to that agreement on what you want, then get counsel, because it might end up being worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think education is a great way to summarize the best way that you can advocate for yourself for the financial picture. And so thank you for that. And then what would you say are some of the common mistakes that you've seen made during divorce that you think a bucket list might help to avoid?
So I think I don't want to repeat this. I don't know. I know we talked about this already. I can't remember if it was about mistakes or not, but I do know that often people won't advocate for what they really want. And even if they have even if they have counsel, your lawyer's only going to fight as hard as you want to fight. They're not going to go the extra mile for you if you don't want it. So if you're not, you are your hero, and you have to be your hero in this situation. Nobody else is going to do it for you. Yeah. And so, the mistake of not advocating just because you want it to get over faster, or you don't feel worthy of getting what you want, is something that people often do. And when you go through and you do this divorce bucket list, you're slowly building confidence blocks. And as you're building confidence blocks, you're empowering yourself, and you're letting yourself know that you are worthy of these things that you want. And not only that you're worthy, like as you start to challenge yourself through these things on the list and you start to get them done, and you're building that confidence and the empowerment, you're seeing that, okay, well, maybe I wanted this divorce over quickly because I didn't want to deal with the unknowns, the fear, the pain, the struggle. But as you're going through the divorce bucket list and you're seeing that you can do some things that are maybe seemed scary or hard to you before, and you get them done, you get confident about it, then you're like, you know what? I can make this last an extra year if it means I get what I want in the end. So it does really, truly empower you to fight for what you want.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes, especially as women, once a decision is made, especially if she's the one that files, or even if, he did and she's just come to terms with it now, there's a lot of a feeling of just, I'm done. And I often say, when a woman is done, it's taken a very, very, very long time for her to get there. But most likely she's never going to come back from that. She's truly done. Now, on the flip side of that, men tend to make quicker decisions that they then have more regrets about because they didn't put all of that effort and time into making that decision. And so their done is less done, so to speak. So I think that one thing that I sense as I hear you talk about the divorce bucket list is just simply that we can work through all of the little straggly feelings and thoughts and tasks and all the stuff that divorce is in a way that we can kind of work past that block of done and advocate well for ourselves by doing so, by just being willing to explore what is inside of us and what are we feeling, what are we thinking, through journaling, through the making of lists to help us to get organized, both in our thoughts and in the practical matters of the divorce. It's all about self-exploration and choosing to believe that there's more to all of this than just the yuck that we see in front of us right now. There's an opportunity here to create something that maybe we couldn't have if we'd stayed or if the marriage had held. Yeah. What are your final thoughts on all of this about the divorce bucket list and your experience in writing it and how you hope it helps people?
I would say that in many ways, my personal divorce bucket list saved my life. If not, saving my life on the level of existence, then it at least saved it on the level of the quality of life that I live. I definitely, if I hadn't gone through that list and used it and really committed myself to the process of it, then I wouldn't be where I am in my career. I wouldn't be where I am in knowing my worth in terms of, the lifestyle that I live, nor would I be in a healthy relationship like I am now. And so I really encourage everyone to, whether you go through the formal process of a divorce bucket list or just write out a couple things and start doing them just to get yourself into motion and start empowering yourself, just make it happen. Just do the hard thing. It takes a couple seconds to just write some things down and then put it somewhere you're going to see it every day so that you don't forget about it and just start taking small actions.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been great exploring this with you. I think that you and I have a lot in common, and certainly I can sense that we definitely have much of the same advice and wisdom for those who are following in our footsteps, and with the same heart to help people not make the mistakes that either we managed to avoid or we made and later regret. And so we want to help people to get through that heightened emotional load of divorce so that they can make decisions that they can be proud of and certainly not have regrets about. So thank you for writing the divorce bucket list and being here today to share your experiences and your wisdom with us. Thank you for sharing this concept, and just tell us now, I guess, where the listeners can pick up a copy of this book if they're interested.
Sure, of course. And thank you again also so much for having me. So you can get your copy of Divorce Bucket List at Amazon or any major book retailer. There's an ebook and paperback version as well. And you can also go to divorcebucketlist.com.
Okay, very great. Well, thanks again for being here. Listeners, thank you for joining us again this week to hear more about how you can do better, live better, divorce well, and live well, right? And so thank you for your dedication to spending time with us here each week as we explore all of the different ways that you are working through your divorce. And I will meet you again here next Wednesday for more help as you divorce and hope as you are starting over stronger.